Shall we? So we are right now in Parak Chavtet in the home of Lavan Ha'arami. Say Ulmad, Ma Bikesh Lavan Ha'arami La'asot, as we'll be reading in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Let's see what Lavan Ha'arami sought to do. And not to go off topic to talk about the Haggadah Shel Pesach, but we know that we are conditioned. And I would argue even on the level of Pshat, before we get to any Midrashim, by the time we get to the end of the story of Lavan, as a manipulative person with a lot of duplicity that runs through the way in which he interacts with others, disingenuous nature, and we'll see examples of that. The picture is not made total in the opening act unless you start thinking about some of the Midrashim. The Midrashim hit the ground running. The first minute that Yaakov encounters Lavan, he's already hugging and kissing him in order to not just embrace, but also search for various jewels, gems, gold, whatever it is. He's looking for his pot of gold. On the level of Pshat, you could take a more sympathetic view in Pasuk Yod Gimel, that he gave him a hug, he gave him a kiss, he brought him to the house. There was general hospitality, and he kept him in the house. And after a month, he said to him, why should you just, remain here for free? You're working for me for nothing. Maybe I should give you something for it, compensation, if you will. And what does Yaakov say? All I want is to marry your daughter. All I want. But meaning I don't want financial compensation. And to you, it's what do I owe you? Transactional. And to me, it's about building a relationship. Yeah. Alternatively, Lavan is in his special manipulative way trying to maneuver Yaakov into a long-term arrangement to keep him as a shepherd. We learned that according to some of the Mefarshim, Yaakov became the shepherd, taking on Rachel's role, because he could not abide the idea that Rachel was going out to be a shepherdess, and he took over her jobs, essentially, to relieve her of those responsibilities. Well, that's what we had seen in some of the Mefarshim last week. What we come to today is to talk a little bit about Rachel and Leah. Note that until this moment, we don't know anything about Leah. We only find out in Pasuk Tet Zayin, verse 16, that Lavan has two daughters. Till now, we only heard about one of them, and that's because she was in the story. By the by, there's an older sister. And as I think it was Shelley pointed out, quoting from Rashi, quoting from the Medrash, there was apparently a well-known saying or expectation, whether it was stated or assumed or whatever it is, that the elder of the daughters would marry the elder son of Rivka and Yitzchak, and the younger daughter would marry Yaakov Avinu. You understand, of course, that this is on the level of Medrash, the symmetry between the two sons and the two daughters, and them getting married. It's a Medrash. The Medrash is focused on the fact that when it describes Leah and Rachel in terms of some aspect of their physicality, it wants to show a contrast between them. Recall that for Yaakov and Esav, there was also a contrast between the two of them, right? Yaakov is an ish chalak, and Esav is an ish seir, right? One is smooth, one is hairy. One has a ruddy complexion, and the other one does not seem to have a ruddy complexion. There's some distinctions between them. In the case of Yaakov and Esav, they're twins. Are Leah and Rachel twins? That's not clear. Not clear. But certainly the idea that there is an older and a younger, the Gedola and the Ketana, the Gadol and the Katan, the Ben HaGadol and the Ben HaKatan. There's a parallel there, obviously. And what is just really important to realize is that while we're reading the story on the level of Pshat, of course, there's so much going on under the surface. And one of those things is, why is the distinction between Leah and Rachel that Leah, her eyes are rakot, and Rachel is very beautiful, is that Leah is supposed to marry Esav, so her eyes are rakot, means that they're themselves in a state of upset, right? She's worried that she's going to marry this wicked person, Esav, and therefore her eyes are they're raw from crying. You could even say they're red from crying. Fits with Esav and his redness. Shelly, give me another 2 minutes. I'm still setting this up. Of course, I want to hear questions and comments, but I need 2 more minutes indulgence, please. So you have Esav, Leah, Rachel, and Yaakov. It is interesting that the Medrash makes this connection. Rashi quotes it, that because she thought, I'm going to have to marry Esav, she's crying all the time. Everybody is thinking that the birth order should determine who marries who. The birth order should determine what happens, right? So what we saw in the story of Yaakov and Esav was that the birth order was not entirely determinative, or it was somehow transferable. The story with the soup, the story of the bracha that Yaakov takes and that Esav is denied. Yeah. So wouldn't that have happened again had Yaakov married Rachel? Yes, but it's not the same thing. Yaakov and Rachel met each other, and it was a relationship that they had, and that's why he claims that's who he wants to marry. Vayehav Yaakov et Rachel v'yomer evodcha sheva shanim b'Rachel bitcha haketana. I know that I'm talking about Rachel, your daughter, who is the younger, right? So Rashi right here, I'll work for 7 years. By the way, why did he choose 7 years? Why didn't he choose a year? Why did he choose 7? That's a question. But he also spells out, and this becomes an aphorism today that sometimes you'll find people use in Israel in a business context when they want to speak about specificity and avoiding doublespeak or handling. They'll say Barachal bitcha ktana. Rashi quotes this. Why all of this? Because he knew that he was dealing with a Lavan who was a cheat and a person who constantly was engaged in just that, the parsing of language in ways that would be advantageous to him. So he said, I will work for Rachel. I will work in order to earn Rachel. And if you'll tell me there's another Rachel who's from the Shuk, I want your daughter, Bitcha, your daughter Rachel. And if you'll say to me, you know what? The names Rachel and Leah are themselves transferable, so I'll change their names without their permission. I'm telling you, I want the younger one. And her name is Rachel. Rachel, your daughter, the younger. Rachel bitcha ktana. But Rachel bitcha ktana becomes an expression. It's like my Inyan Shemitah Eitzel Har Sinai. It goes in the same basket. So all to say, in Rashi's rendering, Leah's soft eyes are raw eyes from crying, from upset, from knowing that there is some expectation she's going to marry that Esav. Again, it presupposes everybody knows Esav's a Rasha. It presupposes a lot of things, but on the level of matters, is exactly what's happening, and Leah does not want that to be. Other Mefarshim, 1 more minute, and I'll turn over questions, comments. Whoever it is, Radak says she is very beautiful also, but the beauty is clouded by the tears that she has. Rashbam, very simply, Rakot, soft eyes. Naot, they're beautiful eyes, right? And the Kala with beautiful eyes, then says Chazal, the Gemara, Masechet Tanit, she has beautiful eyes, then we don't have to investigate the rest of her. Her eyes say everything. Yeah. And she was a beautiful person. That's all. And Rachel had other type of beauty. That's all. It's just telling you 2 different things. Ve'ene Leah Rakot is not a reflection of her upset. It's a reflection of the fact that her beauty was so focused on her eyes that everything flowed from there. And Rachel was in a general sense. One was specific, one was general. Whatever you want to say about that. And Yaakov loved Rachel. It makes it sound, on the backdrop of how they look, makes it sound like it was an issue of appearances. But wait a minute, that's not what happened. Yaakov and Rachel already met each other before, remember, previously, which means they already had a rapport with each other. Also, they're sisters. It could be they look very different. Could be they don't look so different. The point was Yaakov loved Rachel. They had already a relationship. Now he tells him, okay, when he's asked the questions, I'll work for 7 years in order to marry Rachel. The Chizkuni just says his eyes were already on her. That's why. That's why. So he couldn't have married Leah. Maybe if he had met her first, but he met Rachel first. Case closed. Not much more that you need to say about it. One last point about this, which is we need to be a little bit careful when we read Tanakh, particularly like a statement like this, that ideas about beauty and the role of aesthetics and their relationship to marriage and romance and all that, these are, in almost all respects, they've shifted from what they were in antiquity. I'm not suggesting there was no such thing as beauty in the past, but people didn't get married for romance. I'm suggesting that the animating reasons that propelled relationships were not as they are today, which is why so much of the literature of the Middle Ages, of the Renaissance, particularly about the notions of romantic love, etc., in the Western canon, are actually in many ways mechudash. Romeo and Juliet is not just because it's a pair of star-crossed lovers, lahavdil, but because the idea that two feuding families would that their children would find each other and want to marry was that's a chiddush. It's a chiddush. It was the exception, not the norm. Yeah, and I have a lot more to say on the subject. Tomber en amour in French, to fall in love. The idea of falling, that it was something that was negative, because the ideal in Christian milieu is not that way. You love God, you don't love other people, etc., etc. So tomber en amour en français, and in English, to fall in love. It was a notion of falling from a religious perspective. That's not the This is not the Jewish way, of course. But just when we see these psukim, we should ask, okay, why do we need to know anything about their physical appearance? Is it because Yaakov was attracted to her for that reason? Not clear at all. Not clear at all. We'll get to Lavan's answer in a minute. Let me take some questions and comments. Shelley, you were first. Go ahead, please.
My problem is, as usual, that the midrashim don't work with the peshat, and they contradict each other, and they just sometimes don't make sense. In verse 19, if there was this thing that one son was supposed to marry one of Lavan's daughters, and the other son was supposed to marry the other one, he wouldn't have said, it's better that I give you to her than I give her to another man. He would have said, we have your parents and I have an arrangement. That's why that's it. He's got to know, he's been living there for 30 days. So he has to know Leah too. The difference between the contrasting Esav, even if you're going to do the midrashim that Esav is evil and Yaakov is good, doesn't work with Leah and Rachel, because they're both supposed to be imahot, which puts them almost on a saint level, which drives me nuts too. You also have the idea that Yaakov left at age 60. And if he goes to this yeshiva, and for another 13, 14 years, he's in his mid-70s. How old are these girls? And if they were just in their 20s or teenagers,
why are they interested in marrying him?
Yes, there wouldn't have been that arrangement to marry them. I'm sorry to throw all these things in there, but I'm trying to make sense.
Right.
You need the historical accuracy, in a sense, to get to the hidden message. I know that a lot of you don't think so, but I do think so. These things actually happened. And if I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of them is, I have to know what actually happened. And so this is very, very conflicting. If it's the older one has to be married first, wouldn't Yaakov have known that? Wouldn't he knows that so much, that Lavan is such a trickster. He's trying to set it in, but he hasn't managed to do it from what happens.
As usual, you made a number of fascinating points. I'd love to respond to them, but I feel overwhelmed by how many there are. So I'm going to try to. You have another one you want to make before I try to?
No, I'll be quiet from now on.
No. Just I want to answer these, and we can move past it. Move on. So
maybe I want a methodological answer first on how to put these things into context. Right. I guess that's
why we're here. That's why we're here. The question of what actually happened is not the primary question. The primary question is, what is the Torah trying to teach me now in this pasuk, in this perek, in this parsha, in this sefer? It's not what actually happened. It's not because that's a totally immaterial question, but because that's not the first driving, animating element. Because just stam to tell us nice stories, there are lessons and messages. So
But Rabbi, you know that in halacha, that the actual facts will manage, you may get a different halakhic answer based on just changing one little thing. Like if you're
the reality of the situation, you're saying,
yes, reality of the situation. So that's why the reality of the situation to me is so important in this, because how can I figure out what the Torah is trying to teach me if I don't know what the actual facts are, so that in this particular situation, you should do this, and in that particular situation, you should do that.
I hear it. So then the question turns on, what is the definition of the word reality? I'm sorry to get philosophical, but we went down this road. Is the reality what actually historically transpired on one level? But on another level, isn't the reality also, or maybe more importantly, what do I learn from what has happened? So for instance, to begin with the end in mind, right? Just to start from the end point. By the end of the story, Lavan, as we will read and allude to, and read at the Seder, Lavan says to Yaakov and his wives, who are his daughters, and his children, meaning the grandchildren, I could kill you now. By the end of the story, it's pretty overt. It's the end of Parshat Vayetze. So the question becomes, well, knowing that he's going to get to that point, he's going to speak in such a way. I could have killed you right now. I won't, because God told me I can't. Is that now telling us that this is where Lavan went to from the perspective of his moral compass? Or does it show us something about who he was all along? In the first case, all of these stories can be read as Lavan's just a good guy who gives his nephew hospitality. Everything's good. And over time, he had a moment where at the end there was a lapse and he said something that most people probably wouldn't say to their grandchildren. I could either hug you and kiss you, or I could slaughter you all now. But I'm not going to do the latter, because God came to me in a dream and told me I'm not allowed to do that. That's what it says at the end of Parshat Vayetze. That's one option. And that would teach us certain lessons about, look how far people can fall. Or even the best, nicest person could have a momentary lapse that could be pretty egregious. Or what that showed was that actually, when we go back and read the story, we start realizing that from day one, things were happening that were not exactly as they seemed on the level of Pshat. There were clues, there were hints, there were ideas about things that didn't add up about this person, and aspects to his character that if we just scratch the surface, we find out there's something else at play. And it might be in reference to what happened at the end that gave us an idea to go back to the beginning of the story and cast it in different colors. What actually happened, what words were actually spoken, is now lesser important than appreciating the lessons that we're taking from an appreciation, a total appreciation of the character of this man. I'm just using the example of Lavan. It doesn't discount that he said the words that he said, but an educated reader, educated by the end of the story maybe, goes back and says, but what was actually at play over here? Ooh, actually this happened and that happened and that happened and that happened and that happened. We're going to see it in a different light. It's not the historical light of the actual record and level of pshat of what happened. It's learning on a deeper level what was at play. And let me now home in now on the Rachel Leah piece and the Yaakov piece. So as you put a lot of things in the basket, Rachel Leah, on the level of pshat, Rachel and Leah are just two sisters. It mentions that one is older, one is younger. It mentions that one is with eyes called rakot. It says something about her eyes, and the other one that she's very beautiful. Yifat Torah, Yifat Mar'eh, her description and her appearance. And that's instructive because something's going to happen in the future regarding these two sisters the switcheroo. That's without question. There's a switch that goes on there. And it does come as a surprise to Yaakov, as far as we can tell, because he says, why did you cheat me? Which implies very strongly he didn't realize he was being played, and he was played. And Rachel and Leah, it just tells you that they look different. That's all. The Medrash, however, wants us to appreciate that whatever's going to happen in the story between Yaakov, Rachel, Leah, Lavan, there's some playing out of something that happened back in the old country in his hometown, in Yaakov's hometown, and Yaakov's life from before. Goyim have a word for this. The Jews don't call it that way. We say midah keneged midah. We say one as against another. Oh, Jerry and Tamar, Chag Kasher v'Sameach. I see you just texted, you have to leave early. Okay, be well. So midah keneged midah is, don't think that there isn't going to be some way there'll be a payback for what you've done. Somehow it's going to come back to you. Who's running the world? Hashem's running the world. There'll be some way that he'll engineer that's what's going to happen. And that's what happened. That is what happened. Because when Yaakov goes to the home of Rachel and Leah, he's left behind Esav way back somewhere else. Chazal, and Rashi's just quoting it, wants you to realize, wait a second. See, there's two sisters here. Remember there were two brothers? You think that it didn't follow Yaakov from there to here? Sure it did. Sure it did. Now, historically, actually, do Rachel and Leah have a clue who Esav is? If they did, then it's kind of strange that when Yaakov meets Rachel, he has to tell her who he is. I'm your cousin. They don't recognize each other. It's not like they got together for Hanukkah or Pesach or something. And now, however, Chazal want you to understand that Leah, maybe she heard the story. Oh, I have an older brother. They're eating lunch together. And Yaakov says, by the way, I have an older brother. And everyone's, ooh, interesting. And you're the younger brother? And I'm the younger sister? We think there's going to be a symmetry that the younger should go with the younger, the older with the older. But where's that going to leave Leah Imenu? In a bad way. That she's going to marry Esav? Now, later we'll talk about, was there something possibly that was supposed to happen involving, and I want to bring it up now, so please don't enter into the conversation, about Esav marrying someone in the family, that there could have been a redemption of Esav in some way, and it didn't happen either. We'll come to that when we come to that later on. Vayishlach. But here, the idea is that in the level of pshat, it doesn't have anything to do, and that's why some of the Parshanei Hamikra are saying she wasn't ugly, she wasn't even crying. She had soft eyes. She had beautiful eyes. That's the feature that people would say about her. And in that cultural context, if a person had nice eyes, everything else flowed from there. Nice eyes was like a sign, because the eyes, you could, lahavdil, the eyes are the window to the soul. Whatever, she had beautiful eyes. Everything's good. Yaakov Avinu, I could see two perfect Jews, one of whom says that he spent the 14 years in the yeshiva, and he's in his 70s, and he's coming to marry somebody. And how old are they? We don't really know. I could see one Jew that says that, another Jew that says he left home and he came here, and that's the end of it. And we'll figure out the years some other way. In other words, when you try to put all of the midrashim together and reconcile all of them, and reconcile them with the pshat and say they're all on exactly the same plane, and you see it like just a flat two-dimensional tableau, yeah, you run into all sorts of roadblocks and what have you. But you're looking from the sky down at something that's three-dimensional. You're seeing different levels that are happening, and they're each conveying different types of lessons. And they live with each other in as much as they're not on the same plane. They're on various lines. You understand? I see some hands up. Shelley, go ahead right away. Please go ahead.
There's a third thing that you haven't put in about Lavan and what he says.
I finished at 10. I finished at 10. Yeah, 10. Yeah, go ahead.
About Lavan and what he says at the end of the Parsha. And to me, they're both historically accurate, and it works the best. And it would be like something Rabbi Sachs would say.
Well, maybe you're going to say it in his name.
Yes, I will say it in his name. He didn't actually say it, but he said it about other things, so I'll put it in with this one.
It's something he could have said.
Something he could have said.
So it's like a medrash on the words of Rabbi Sachs.
Yes, okay. It's a medrash on the words of Rabbi Sachs. But I think it goes into the Pashat too, because he said it about a bunch of other things in just that. is the idea of power in the ancient times. We need the historical accuracy. And in this case, just even think of the Romans. The Roman patriarch of the family could have anybody killed. This is a couple of thousand years before. Therefore, Lavan could have had his daughters, his son-in-law,
by his twisted logic, you're saying.
Killed.
By his twisted logic.
Yes. So the idea that he was a good guy who became a bad guy, he's a bad guy from the word go, it doesn't matter. He's from this milieu and he has this power. And the power is life or death over the family. And as Rabbi Sachs always says, Judaism is a revolution against that. God does not want power coming down from the top where there's no morality. It's morality comes from God, and in Abraham's family, that's why he picked Abraham. He will do the right thing. And in that family, Rabbi Sachs does say about the Akedah that it's to show that you don't have power over your children. You have to let them go. And so therefore, this is what I would say is a historical accuracy and the idea of what we are a revolution about. And that's what's so important. So therefore, if we think of Lavan as having power over his family like that, we realize God doesn't want it. That's how we're supposed to deal. That's how we're supposed to live. That's the lesson.
That very well could be one of the lessons. The point is that you see the hostility of this man towards members of his family. And the question is that hostility that is now a naked, open hostility, is that something that is, like you say, falling back on old tropes? Or was there actually some kind of a seething anger that was there the whole time that was just waiting for expression because it's part of a package of a man who, from the first minute we met him, when he was just somebody's brother, Rivka's brother, he's already acting in a pretty, whatever the word is, manipulative, that's the best word I have, manner. He's trying to get one up on other people and see how he could manipulate whatever it is. He's trying to get himself involved. I mean, that's also a reading. My point to you, Shelley, is just to say that when we learn a story in the Torah, we're not simply learning it on the level of pshat. The level of pshat itself even has limitations on telling us what the reality, in quotation marks, is of what actually happened. And reality is not just the history. In other words, we live at a time we want to what are the facts? The facts, what actually happened. But the facts are not telling us the internal dynamics of the people, of the of the circumstances, of the context. We don't have any of that. And that's what the Midrashim very often are trying to fill in. That's what they're trying to do. That's the Indian, to your point, the story is not told to us in its entirety in the pshat. It couldn't be. There are many more layers of lessons, that are being conveyed in the words of the Torah. And I urge you to consider, I say it again, a methodological, a very important point. Torah is not just this. It's a mistake. It's a big mistake. That's a Torah shebichtav, and we have two Torahs: a Torah shebichtav, a Torah sheba'al peh, right? And when the person who wants to convert to Judaism comes to stand before Shammai and Hillel, there's three stories there. The one everybody knows is, teach me the Torah on 1 foot, but another one is teach me the whole Torah, but I only want to learn Torah shebichtav, not Torah sheba'al peh. Terrible mistake. Not true, not correct, can't be. How come? Because we have two Torahs. What's the other one? Torah sheba'al peh. And they both live together. You'll ask me, well, what actually factually happened? And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter as much as you think. It matters, but it's not the primary motivation of what we're doing. When you try to, and this is the Rambam's point, to my understanding, and as a demo of the Perish HaMishnah, Perek Chelik, what does he write there? Stop trying to reconcile all the midrashim as if they were all telling you a piece of history and like, how are we going to manipulate it and push everything in? That's not what's at play. What's at play is teaching us the truth of the Torah, the lessons of the Torah, and the most authoritative lessons that we have about the Torah are from Chazal. Some of those lessons are actually Misinai. Some of those are actually Misinai, but the word actually means they were actually taught to the rabbi, taught to the student, to rabbi, to the student, to the rabbi, to the student, to the rabbi, to the student, all the way to Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, where someone will come after Rabbi Jonathan Sacks and say, I don't know if he actually said this, but I've studied enough of him and I know enough of him. I consider myself a Talmid or Talmidah of his. I'll tell you what I think he would say here. In the case of Chazal and Midrashim, we simply don't know which is which. We don't know. And I'm telling you, it's a shocking thing to hear the rabbi say, it doesn't matter. Because when we're learning Torah, we're not trying to just mine it for the history book. It's not a history. I've said it many times myself, and I mean it. It's not a history book. What is it? Torah. It's teaching us the derech of Hashem and what Hashem wants us to know and to learn and how to behave. How do we learn that? Sometimes we learn it through stories. Sometimes cautionary tales what we're not supposed to do. Sometimes. And sometimes it's modeling of what we should do. Yeah. And there's a great lesson in that, but it's a challenging one for many people, which is why, again, you will find even among Rabbanim, you'll find people who will spend not the way of the Rambam, but other ways. They'll try to reconcile. How could this be true and that be true? How could we did this in the edition about the Akedah? How could Yitzchak be that age and he's that age? He can't be two ages. How could Rivka be so young and she's out in the middle of the well, and she's 3, and then he's marrying a child. It's like, what's going on? And how old is she really? When we get to now, we're back up to this story. It doesn't matter how old Yaakov. If we want to talk about how old Yaakov was, that's another discussion, right? What we're talking about today is how did it happen that Leah was described as having a Leah Rakot, and Rachel is beautiful, and Yaakov loved Rachel. So when you just read it flat, you think, well, why was that relevant? Rashi tells you it was very relevant because hanging in the air the whole time is the dynamic of who's older, who's younger, who goes first, who goes second. You think Yaakov got away from it because he transferred himself to another part of the world? No, it's still the same dynamic. And who's going to fix him? Who's going to fix the problem and fix him? Right? He got him good. Was Lavan. Right? Notice that Yaakov's not going to divorce Leah when he finds out that it's the wrong woman, or say it was a mekach taut because I didn't really mean to marry her. How come? Taka, good question. So Vayomer Lavan, Tov titiota lach, mititiota leish acher, shva imadi. By the way, did he ask her opinion what she would like? But back in Parshat Toldot, when Eliezer is at the table and he's saying, we want to leave already. That was when, in that moment, now suddenly, not until sorry, I meant to say, that's when Lavan got up and said, we should ask her opinion. Lavan and Betula said, we should ask what she wants to do. What difference did it make what she wanted to do? We all think, well, of course you should ask her, right? Are you willing to go? Yes, I'm willing to go. Why do they do that? But it becomes, in retrospect, a stalling tactic when we consider in that milieu, the father would decide who the daughter was going to marry. It wasn't up to her. It wasn't about romantic love. The exception was they're asking her opinion. Same thing about the idea in the ancient culture where the father can kill the child at will, God forbid. Yeah. So Vayomer Lavan, it'd be better to give her to you than to give her to some other man. So I guess it's so hard for us to part with our beloved, with our beloved, fill in the blank. Annie, Cosette, whatever it is. We can't part with our Rachel, but better to give her to you than to give her to some other guy. Ta-da. Right? But that really wasn't his intention, because we see afterward that he was intending to do the switcheroo, and Yaakov got played. Clearly, he actually says, why did you cheat me? So can't say he knew all along. So Vayavod Yaakov berachel sheva shanim. Vayu ve'inav ki yamim achadim behavato ota. What's with the 7 years? Why 7? Why not 2? Why did he set up that kind of a plan? Going to let that question hang for a little longer. We may not get to it today, but Yaakov is agreeing to something. Lavan has agreed to it. They haven't even consulted Rachel, and Leah was left on the side of the picture over here. She's not getting married to anybody. Vayomer Yaakov el Lavan, hava et ishti ki malu yamai vavoy eleha. The time has come. Yeah. 7 years, right? I finished the time, and I wanna get married, right? What does Rashi point out here? Again, it's on a certain level. You have to understand, like, how to reconcile it. He says, "Oh, now I'm 84." He's an octogenarian. He thinks it's time to settle down and get married. Again, you could say, yes, literally, historically, that must be his age, because when we do the math with this, with that, with the 14 years of yeshiva, Shem ve'aver, and the midrashim, it must be what happened. And then we have to reconcile. So, how old are Rachel and Leah exactly, and what's this about? Alternatively, I don't think you are wedded as a matter of faith to take Rashi's view literally if you don't want to. They didn't render up psak in a halachic matter. Mal'u yamai. My days are filled out. And how are they filled out? These were the days, Rashi points out, that my mother told me I'd have to stay away. A period of staying away for some days. So I filled out the days, right? And how did I do that? I just spent 7 years here. Meaning, I'm going to marry Rachel, according to this pshat, this interpretation, rather. I'm going to marry Rachel, and we're going to go back somewhere else. I'm going to be able to go back home because 7 years elapsed. Someone typed something in it. I didn't get to see it. I'm sorry. So I'll look now. Sorry about that. 7 years is a term for becoming a Jewish slave later in the Torah. Not a slave. You're close. To be redeemed from being a slave, right? 6 years. In the 7th year goes free. But that's what you meant, yeah? So it's the 7, he just hit 7 years, right? By the way, the word for a week in Hebrew is a shavua, but the word for 7 years is also a shavua. And yamim are oftentimes referring to days like a day, like 24 hours a day. And sometimes yamim refer to years, depending. I don't know. Vayihi miketz shnatayim yamim. Not 2 days later, it's 2 years later. Ufaro cholem, beginning of miketz. Parshat Bo, miyamim yamima. You're going to keep this holiday of Pesach miyamim yamima, means every year. Malei shavua zot. You're going to fulfill this shavua. A shavua means an oath. Milashon sheva, right? Be'er sheva, and the sheva, right? Shavua, right? So she told him back in Parshat Toldot, before he left home, what did Rachel Imeinu say to her son before they announced why they're leaving, right? Look at verse 44, back in chapter 27. V'yashavta imo yamim achadim ad asher tashuv chamat achicha. You should stay there for a few days. A few days. It sounds like you'd be there for a week or two or something. Yamim achadim means a few days. Yeah. But here, as the Ibn Ezra already pointed out, yamim achadim was kimo yamim geulato. Yamim meaning shanim muatot, a few years. Yamim achadim. Achadim means it has to be still in the single digits. It can't be 10. That's not achadim. Achadim is lashon echad. So it's going to be in the single digits. You'll stay there for the single digits number of years. What's that number? It's 7. 7 years. And therefore, verse 20, Yaakov worked for Rachel sheva shanim, vayu be'einav keyamim achadim, like a few days. Ba'avotota. Time passed quickly. Interesting also in the timing of everything. Kfitzat haderech, things go speedily. Remember Yaakov traveling back and forth. He's going from Beersheva up to Yerushalayim, to Beit El, to Haran, maybe from Beersheva to Haran on the express, and he comes back. We talked about that, to Beit El, to Yerushalayim, whatever it is. And when we keep going around and around, there's another kfitza of time, right? Not a derech of the time, but a kfitza derech. Hi, give me 2 more minutes. I'm finishing the class. Yeah, just don't leave. Right? What's the kfitza now? 7 years went by, just like that. Kiyamim achadim. But the illusion here, kiyamim achadim. But that's what his mother told him. It's going to be kiyamim achadim. Yeah. And why did he come up with 7? Right? Like we said, could be related to servitude. Could be related to the fact that a period of 7 years, even then, like it's called a shavua, right? This is also in Parshat Mishpatim, where there's a reference to 6 days you should work, and on the 7th you're going to rest. There's one rendering of it in the Medrash that maybe it refers to 6 years of working the land, b'charish uvakatzir, and then in the 7th you stop, right? The Shemitah cycle is called a Shavua. You get the gist, yeah? So when you keep reading and you see, I'm fast forwarding now, we don't have time to parse it, there are people waiting with the chametz now, but right? So all of these things, and he's asking, now's the time, right? So Lavan makes a big party, and behold, who gets married in the end? It's going to be the wrong person. We'll have to come back to that next time with the switcheroo. But what does he tell him? Look at verse 25, where he asks him, what did you do? I worked for you for Rachel. Why did you cheat me? So again, from that point, like, is that like a momentary lapse? Or when we look previously, we're going to start mining the stories for like, oh, and that was bad, and that was bad, and that was bad. Wait, he did show affection. Oh, he's complicated. Yeah, he showed affection. He was feeling his back to see if he's hiding stuff. Oh, he gave him a kiss. Oh, he grabbed his mouth to see if he's some jewels hiding in his jowls. Like, right? Why? Because look what happened. Okay, this is a massive act of fraud. I don't know what else to call it. But Lavan says, well, we don't do that here. We have rules here to give the younger before the older. Tell me something. If that's the rule, you didn't tell him before. You waited till after the wedding? Wink, wink, nod, nod. And all the people are there. Do they know? Are they complicit? Did no one recognize how Leah walks down the aisle, B'tzitutim, how she comes to the chuppah? They didn't know her from childhood. Maybe they were in on it, maybe not. That's its own discussion. But then I'm fast forwarding for this. Verse 27, Pasuk Chav Zayin, Malei shvua zot, v'nitna lecha gam et zot ba'avodah shetavodim adi od sheva shanim acherot. I want 7 more years. Vayas Yaakov Cain, vaymalei shvua zot, right? According to many of the Mepharshim, he finished the week, and then he got to marry her. Vayitin lo et Rachel bitol lo liisha. And then came another 7 years. Verse 30. Pasuk Lamed. So the idea that this is all connected, and on the level of pshat, just on the level of pshat, because certain things are happening, we start to second guess what we heard before, and the presentation, quote unquote, involving Torah Sheba'al Peh as well. We start to say, Chazal didn't just decide they got it in for Lavan. There were indications in the pshat, but they also cast a pall on what happens even earlier than these indications in the pshat. And that's methodologically one of the things that's at play for the Midrash. And I urge you again to consider, Torah Shebichtav is but one facet, a crucial facet of the Torah, but it's not the whole Torah. It's a part of the Torah. I would argue the smaller part of the Torah. The bigger part is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, some of which is the interpretive gesture of Chazal based on what they read in the pshat, and some of it are received traditions. Which is which? Doesn't matter. What actually happened? What's the reality? Well, it depends what you mean by actually and what the reality is. Anyway, there's a line outside my door, so I have to let everyone go. I wish you a Chag Kasher V'Sameach. We will have a shiur on Thursday. We will not have a shiur next Monday or next Thursday. Next Monday. We might have a shiur the following Thursday as well. Certainly this Thursday will be a shiur. I look forward to seeing everyone then. Got to let you go because we have people outside.
What are you talking